Hi, my name is Michael Dell. I'm a Ganawage Rono living with special needs. When I was interviewed, I had an idea for a show for people from Ganawage living with disabilities. Today is the start of that show, Walk in My World. Often, people with disabilities lead sheltered lives, and their interactions are limited to caregivers and family members. I hope this show will bring you awareness of these people, their families, their lives, and their dreams for the future. Welcome back to Walk in My World. Today we are here to interview the former Director of Education in Ganawage, Eddie Cross. Welcome, Eddie, and thank you for joining us today on Walk in My World.
Thank you, Michael.
We will be talking about how it was to integrate people with special needs way back then, from the beginning. So maybe you can start by explaining how many years you teach in the Ganawage education system.
Okay. Well, teaching was my first part of my contribution to education in Ganawage, but my total number of years servicing the community was 44 years, and I retired on June 30th of this year.
After you stopped teaching, you moved on to the Ganawage Education Center. So what were your roles in the Ganawage Education Center?
Mm-hmm. Well, my first years were as a classroom teacher. I taught grade 6 and grade 4. And during those years, I also went to McGill University to complete a master's in special education. And when I completed that, then I started my work in providing services and programs and staffing for students in the system with special needs.
So you helped to create those programs within Ganawage?
Yes, I would say I played a very key role in the establishment of services for children that required more than a regular classroom teacher can provide.
Okay, so, but before that, before you started all that, where did our disabled Ganawage Rono have to go to school?
Well, in the case of my siblings, my brothers, Harold and Glenn and Charlene, they didn't go to school, they stayed home. And I think that was typical of other families in Ganawage who had children that had a whole range of different special needs.
You would say when you got there in Ganawage education system that you were one of the pioneers to bring all that to Ganawage?
Yes, I would say so. And if I can go back to my family history, I felt that it was important to provide the services to a whole range of children with special needs. My family is made up of 3 brothers that had special needs. I have a photo of my brothers here. My brother Harold, who was just 2 or 3 years older than I am, was removed from the community and placed in an institution in Quebec City, Hotel Juice du Sacré-Cœur. And he was placed there by the medical services in Ganawage at that time. It was a nurse, they used to call her the big nurse, and she recommended to my mother that it was best to place Harold in this institution. And it was only many years later that I realized that it was an institution for adults, and at that time he was a 12-year-old boy. And he was also in an environment where the only language spoken was French. So it was very, very hard on him and very hard on us. As I said, we would go and visit him once or twice a year. And it was a very, very emotional meeting each time because he really missed us, and he particularly missed my mother. When the institution closed about 20 years ago, they had to place all of the, well, at that time called patients, in other institutions. And my brother Harold was placed in a convalescent home in Verdun. And we only found that out, no one told us about my brother being transferred out of this institution that he was in Quebec City to a convalescent home in Verdun. It was a visitor from Ganawaga who saw my brother and recognized that he could be from Ganawaga and contacted the hospital, and the hospital consequently contacted my family, and we immediately had him transferred to Cattery Memorial Hospital at that time. And he lived out his years in that institution, in that hospital. But because I have three siblings who were, I guess we'd call them handicapped today, or with special needs, I really spent a lot of my time when I was in university trying to find out, how was this caused? How do they become that way when my other four brothers had no problems at all, were very normal. So it was a search for most of my life on answers to questions that I had, and I often found those answers, I said, when I went to university, and I did a lot of research.
So getting back to when you were helping to start Ganawaga education for people with special needs in Ganawaga, did you stumble across any stumbling blocks along the way, or was it an easy process?
Well, at that time, special education was not a major concern of education institutions, and only later did the Ministry of Education, and in our case, we're sponsored by Indian Affairs through an organization called First Nations Education Council. And when First Nations Education Council was founded, one of their major objectives was to look at how can we help First Nations communities in Quebec who have children with special needs. And in most cases, none of those communities had any kind of services. So I would say that Ganawaga was a pioneer in terms of providing services for children with special needs in their community schools.
Did the families of special needs children participate willingly?
Yes, they did. I know that in my case, there were a group of mothers who got together, and they would meet and just discuss their common concerns and needs, and it was just kind of a grassroots group of mothers. And only later did it become much more formalized, where the schools worked very closely with homes and parents in providing support services for the parents as well as for the children.
At that time, did the staff have any special training?
No, as I said, special education training wasn't part of university education, and that only came in very, very recently. So fortunately, some of our teachers were able to get into programs like that. But because of the fact that there was limited enrollment, we started to provide training in-house in our community schools, particularly at Cattery School.
One question I'm going to change over. Sure. How did the kids that didn't have special needs react to having kids with special needs in their school? How was that integration process started?
Yeah, I have never experienced it being a problem. Most of the children who were in the schools were siblings or friends or neighbors, and so they knew each other. Uh, the, the, they knew the families, and it never seemed to have been an issue from my experience.
Would you say that Ganawagi is up to par with other Native communities?
Oh, like, years and years ahead of other communities. Um, and only because we had people who were committed to providing programs and services. And I keep going back to FNEC, First Nations Education Council, who really supported this initiative and were successful in getting the government to allocate funding for it.
So are you satisfied with Ganawagi education today, looking back?
Oh, definitely. I mean, we could change the entire, I guess, education system by integrating students with special needs. Now, not all students with special needs, especially those which would categorize as severe special needs. In some cases, parents didn't feel that we had the programs and the staff to be able to manage them. And parents sometimes decided that the best place for their child would be in a place like Mackay Center and other institutions that provided support programs for them. But we did as much as we can to try to make sure that they were in programs that were not any different from other children in the classrooms and in the schools.
And I imagine way back then, setting all this up, all the buildings weren't designed for wheelchairs and everything, so you had a lot of work to do in that area too.
Yes. At Cattery, for example, which is a 3-level building, we had to install an elevator. In fact, when Garinuha School was rebuilt, it used to be a 1-level building. When the building was rebuilt, it was a 2-story building, and of course we put elevators in that building too. So we've provided for all types of accommodation for children, no matter what their needs were.
I know for myself, and I'm just going to share something personal with my audience. When I had the opportunity to go to school, because of all the physical therapy that I needed, I didn't have the opportunity to go to my community school, and that's one thing that I missed out on. Mm-hmm. So, there's some drawbacks, but it's not it's not the fault of the Ganawagi education system. It's just because I needed too much physical therapy and occupational therapy, and it was easier for me to go to school in Montreal where I could receive that on a daily basis.
Mm-hmm. And we provided the transportation for it. Yes.
Yep. So, was the community open and involved with the integration?
Well, from my experience, I never found any parent who was felt that their child's education was compromised by having students in the school that had a variety of handicaps and needs and special accommodations such as your needs.
Yeah.
No one ever really said anything to me, or I never heard any parents complaining about the fact that maybe their children's education was being compromised by including children with a whole range of special needs.
Yeah, and sometimes when you have that, it's rewarding for that. So, are you satisfied with the way Ganawagi education is today, now that you stepped away and are looking from the outside?
Yes, well, provide education in Ganawagi is very unique because um, we offer trilingual education. So, and you won't find that in any other kind of school setting where English, Mohawk, and French were part of the core curriculum. Um, in terms of providing support for students who were having difficulties, children with special needs, we hired teachers who were qualified, uh, and we had a coordinator who was highly qualified, had previous experience with other special schools, and we provided as much training as we were able to, negotiate with McGill to provide special education support. So, and of course, the other thing is that we have a lot of staff who are called teaching assistants, who are either one-to-one with a student or one to a small group. So I would say that comparing Ganawage programs and services in relationship to special needs were probably much further advanced than any public or private school in the Montreal area.
So I guess you can say that when you retired, you left Ganawagi education system in good hands.
Oh, definitely, yes, yes. And I said we've been doing it for years. It's not just something that happened overnight. It took a long time to get to where we are today, which is really quite an exemplary school.
Yeah, I guess other Native communities can look to Ganawagi as the model, see what was done to get there.
Yes, I promote our school system often as a member of First Nations Education Council. I played a key role in terms of having other communities adopt similar programs that we have.
Yeah. So, guess all in all, it's all in good hands.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
And one more question that I had: the teachers and the teachers' assistants receive ongoing support and training.
Ongoing, yes, yes, definitely. New recruits are trained by. We have a special education coordinator at Cattery School. We have one at Ganawagi Survival School, but we don't have anyone at Garinoha School. The number of students that have special needs at Garinoha School would be considered to be minor.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if, just as an example, if I walked into the education center and I said, my son or daughter has a special need, I would like them to go in Ganawagi for schooling. Would they be assessed at some point down the line to see where they fit in, or they'll be allowed to just integrate right in to the school, and then as time goes along, if the school staff recognize the problem, is it only looked at when that problem is recognized?
No. The first thing we do is we do an assessment. And with the assessment, we determine the assessment not only at the level of the student, but in terms of the teacher's capacity, as well as parents' needs. So it's a collaborative effort between the school and the home.
Okay, so if he or she needs extra time away from that classroom teacher, one-on-one, they'll get it.
Mm-hmm. We try not to segregate one-to-one. We try to keep small groups together.
Okay.
But in the case where some children may require more than the services that we have, we do accommodate for one-to-one support.
Okay, it's not heavily promoted, but if it's needed, it's there.
Yes.
Okay. So, just some good stuff to know.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you wanted to add? Anything we might have forgotten?
No, I think that your advocacy for special education has been an important component to what we've been doing, and we've been kind of communicating with each other for years when you were at Mackay, and
Yeah. Well, thank you very much for coming on to Walk in My World and explaining about how it was way back then. I always knew that Ganawagi was a leader in special education, among other things. It's nice to know that for people that have special needs children, or that are going to have, maybe they'll end up with them in the future. It's nice to know that we have a good service to help take care of that. Thank you very much for appearing on Walk in My World.
thank you for inviting me, Michael.
Well, we've come to the end of another episode of Walk in My World. If you have any comments or questions, you can email me at walkinmyworld@yahoo.ca. Ona.
More than 14% of all Canadians have a disability. For Aboriginal First Nation Canadians, there are 33% of people living with disabilities. People living with disabilities are subject to exclusion, poverty, and isolation. There are higher rates of depression, suicide, violence, and abuse for people with disabilities. We know that for Aboriginal Canadians with disabilities, all these rates and percentages are even higher. Statistics according to Independent Living Canada